Good morning. Advanced Neurospinal Solutions, Dr. Roger Elmer, Brain Workshop. And today we want to do a little bit of an extension on what we talked about last time. We talked about balance. We talked about the three major systems. There are other systems involved, but the three major systems that are involved in balance. Why do we talk about balance? We talk about balance because, especially for those 65 and older, the number one reason for hospital visits, for visits to the emergency room for age 65 or older is falls. And falls can be disastrous. Falls can lead to blood clots that go to the heart, that go to the lungs, that go to the brain. If it goes to the brain, it's a stroke. If it goes to the lungs, it's called an embolus. If it goes to the heart, it's called a myocardial infarction, or commonly called a heart attack. It can also unalterably change the course of that individual's life, what they can do. Once they've had a broken hip, nothing is the same. And it's rare that their life gets better. It's more common that they become more and more restricted at an accelerated pace. And so in our office, the number one rule is no falling. Not just in the office, but no falling when you're outside the office. And so one of my major goals for every patient is extreme excellent balance. And that's why we have so many pieces of balance equipment. And as we're taking care of the patients, we rotate what they're on so that their brain is constantly learning, their brainstem is constantly learning better balance. It's getting some new challenge. In the literature, it's called perturbation. In the literature, it's also called utilizing the writing reflex system. The writing reflexes are those reflex systems that cause you to get your uppermost, meaning you get your head up on a stable foundation. Now, we work with that, but in order to accelerate the process of balance, we utilize what's called tilt reflex technology. Tilting reflexes are getting your uppermost on an unstable foundation, like when you're walking on the moving sidewalk at the airport and you get your balance. That was your tilting reflex that got you that balance back. And so that tilting reflex allows us to support and improve our writing reflex circuitry. And so we utilize that a lot, not only in the office, but the patients get home exercises and a home gym. And in the future, we will actually teach you how to make your own home gym. I recommend that anybody over 40 have a muscle building program. And then anybody over 50, they should have a balance gym in their home, which is really simple and really cheap to put together, and it doesn't get more expensive until you need some more expensive equipment to help you change that or stimulate the need for change. And that's what we're about here. Our number one principle that we operate on is the law of adaptation. We're going to force the system to have to adapt, to change. As we do that, as we force it to have to change, it will change. We call that neuroplasticity. Now, there's a reverse of that process, and we're all going through it, no matter who you are. Even if you're very, very active, there are things that you don't do that you used to do that you'll find you can't do anymore. And so there's a constant change. It's common to use the term hardwired within the brain, and I've quit using that term. The term I use now is soft wire. I like that much better because we're going to wire it in, but it can unwire and it can change its wiring. It's constantly modifying according to the different kinds of stresses and stimuli that are on it on a daily basis. And so we're looking to teach the system to have better balance. Many times what we're doing is trying to get the balance back that we had in the past when we were younger. So in utilizing this concept of balance and we talked about the three major systems that are involved. We'll talk about others that are involved too, but we're focusing first on these big three. The big three are called the visual tactile system. The visual tactile system is the reflex system of your vision. There's a voluntary part of the system that's more about vision, seeing stuff. And the involuntary, the reflex system, is about responding to changes in your environment, changes in you with respect to that environment that you can visually see, perceive through vision, and then using that reflex to respond to those changes. It's set up, it's a major part of that writing reflex system. It's set up to keep our eyes on the horizon. So if I tend to be like this, it's trying to get my eyes like this. And so it will change my posture in order to get my eyes straight on the horizon, if it can. And we see patients that have gotten so bad that they can't do that. And we're trying to restore that ability, that postural ability. Postural possibilities is the best way to say it from Sergei Grasovetsky, Spinal Engine, amazing book on biomechanics. But he talks about posture being a plethora of possibilities. And the more possibilities we have, the more we can modify as needed. And as things degenerate, things become injured and sloppy, and that we lose more and more possibilities. I used to be able to do this and I can't do it anymore, right? And so that's what we do. We work to restore those possibilities posturally. But the visual tactile systems is one of the major systems of balance. Then we talk about the proprioceptive system. The proprioceptive system is your body sense, pressure, vibration. It includes all of the feelings that you get from your joints, whether it's stretching of joints, compression of joints, all the length of muscles, tensions and tones, where the body is maintaining a certain tone in your muscles, particularly the ones that give you rigidity against gravity. That all is the feeling side of it, and it goes up to what's called the vestibular nuclei. In the brainstem here, we have three major parts: the mesencephalon, or the midbrain we call it, the pons, and the medulla. And if we turn around and we cut away the cerebellum, which sits back here, and we look deep in here in the pons and sometimes a little bit down into the medulla, that little rectangle there is the vestibular nuclei. The vestibular nuclei is the brainstem portion that is what we call the integrator for balance. Stuff comes from your eyes into there. Stuff comes from your body into there, right? I feel the pressure on my right foot, but I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm losing the pressure on my left foot, which means I'm starting to tilt. I'm getting information. The third area is that labyrinth inside my head that feels rotations of my head and feels translations of my head. and it feeds all of that information. Remember, I showed you it was a funnel, and that funnel, all that information comes into here, and this gives the reflex response to bring me back to balance. I don't want to have to think about it to have balance. If I have to think about it, I'm already laying on the floor, right? And so that's the little nucleus that allows us to have that reflex. We also have a major important part of the cerebellum called the floccula nodulus that works together with those head sensors to feed that information, but also to soften it, because that's the fastest reflex you've got. That information comes from the labyrinth. Man, it's going like crazy, 270 miles an hour. As it's going 270 miles an hour, if we were to respond to that, boom, we would be on the floor anyway. Instead of, we'd be reacting to it rather than responding. So it sends the signal out to the floccula nodulus, and the floccula nodulus says, it says to the vestibular nuclei, wow, that was hot. Want me to dial it down? And the vestibular nuclei says, yeah, could you slow it down for me? I really appreciate that. And so it slows it down, and it comes back and it says, oh, I can use that. And it uses that to change the tone of the muscles in our body reflexively so that we can maintain our balance. Pretty cool, huh? And so that cerebellum is another piece of it. It's really important to understand that the whole thing about balance is what we call subcortical, below our big brain part of it. It's reflex, okay? And so our major focus is the reflexes of balance. If you're trying to do it with your head, it's not going to work, right? There is a part that's your head, and we're going to go into that in just a minute here, right? But those three inputs, the visual tactile system, the reflexive visual system, the proprioceptive system, all the different inputs relating to things related to balance, the sensation of it, because you can't control balance if you don't know where you are. That's why balance is impossible in space, because your proprioceptive system is completely unloaded. You don't get any gravitational effect in space. And so that's one of the things that when astronauts come back, they've got to have help, because that proprioceptive system has dialed down. If you don't use it, you lose it. But it goes away by regressive action. We didn't get the stimuli, so now it's getting weaker. Okay? So back to the brainstem, we're going to be creating that reflexive system, improving that reflexive system, and not just each one of those inputs, but their connections into it, and the computer that does that, the integrator, we call it in neuroscience, but the number cruncher, which is the vestibular nuclei, we're improving its ability to function to give us balance. One of my biggest tests in balance is I have you walk and I have you start talking. I have you answer some questions. And if you have to stop to answer the question because you lose your balance, that is a neurological test. We call it dual tasking. And if you can't dual task, walk and chew gum, walk and talk, you got a problem. If you're walking in the forest with a friend and you're talking and you start to lose your balance, but you have to stop talking in order to gain your balance back, that's a little bit of a problem. It's not a huge problem yet, but when you're just basically walking and I ask a question and you have to stop, that's a bigger problem. So, but let's talk now about the voluntary side of balance. This is the brain side. Now, the thing about balance is it's below conscious control. So we call it subcortical. Remember, I used that term already. That means below the big part of the brain. And because it's below the big part of the brain, it's a lot faster. And it happens whether you ask it to or not. Thank goodness. And it's the foundation of all of our balance, because you can modify your balance, you can modify your gait, but that underlying, the subconscious control of it is the foundation and the stability of it. And we want that. We want the underlying subcortical involuntary part of the balance system to significantly improve, so that you will tend not to fall. And if you do, you can immediately restore your balance without actually contacting the ground. The one thing I've learned is the ground is my friend. If I fall, it always catches me every single time. Do you have any friends like that are that dependable? The ground is dependable. So here's the right side of the brain. Here's the left side of the brain. The left side of the brain is about speech, and it is chock full of speech stuff. Well, that doesn't give any real estate for balance. And so we put all of our balance on the right side. And much of it is in this area. This is the parietal lobe. This is frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. Vision, hearing, taste. Deep in there is memory, the hippocampus. Thinking about thinking, motor control, movement, and all of that is in the frontal lobe. This is about your feeding the world in, right? Knowing what's going on outside of you, and knowing your body. We call it the maps. The map of you and the map of your world. And it's back here. Well, right in this area of the brain is the area where balance, where we get all that information, and we sense that there was something going on with balance, right? I tilted to the right, I'm losing control of my left foot, my right foot's gaining most of the balance, and I've got to respond. Well, the reflex will respond before I even know that it did. It's going to happen. Then it's going to feed information up to an area called the PIVC right here. There are three major portions, and this whole area is devoted to it, but that PIVC is the major player. And that PIVC is going to say, oh man, I almost fell. But it's also going to allow us to modify our balance consciously. And that is the brain side of balance. Now here's something that's really, really helpful. And it's about learning, is this a brain problem, or is this a subcortical problem? Meaning those areas, the vision, the visual tactile system, the labyrinthine system, in the head there, we call it the vestibulomotor system, or the proprioceptive system. And so how do I know? Simple question. Is the world moving, or are you moving? If the world's moving, it has something to do with outside the brain, because it senses the outside world. Doesn't that make sense? Got to make sense of this stuff, because otherwise it's it's much more confusing than it has to be. And so I like to make things as simple as possible, because I'm a simple guy. So if the world is moving in any way, whether it's spinning, whether it's floating, if it's moving, it's your peripheral system. If it's you that's moving, it's your brain that's the problem. It's in the PIVC area. And so knowing that, we know, okay, what are we going to do? We still have to find out more of dividing out the three different major systems and others, and my job really is the why. I don't treat the what, I treat the why. You say, well, it could be because I drank a lot of alcohol. That's true. That's true. Are you spinning or are you floating? I'm spinning. Well, it's the labyrinthine vestibulomotor system and the cerebellar floccular system that's having the issue. And so we know, oh, alcohol. Now I know the why. The why is the alcohol has a major impact on the Purkinje cells in the flocculi, which feel spinning, right? They feel those little semicircular canals rolling around. My job is to find that, the real why, and solve that problem, because if I solve that problem, it solves the problem, right? And so if it is a brain problem, we're going to deal with the brain. If it is a proprioceptive, visual, cortical, labyrinthine, and vestibulomotor system, then we're going to be working with that part of the system. Okay? So, and particularly as we get older, we begin to lose these systems, and we'll get into the intricacies of the cerebellum and some of the problems that come that make balance even more difficult. But for now, just think, is it a brain problem or is it a reflex problem? And then we're looking at it from the standpoint of parroting that out. Now, another question, does it get better if your eyes are open or your eyes are closed? That's a really important question. Because if it gets better when your eyes are open, well, how does it get better? It gets better because realize that spinning, unless you're in a car that's out of control spinning, you're not spinning. And you're not perceiving the spin of the world because it feels like it's not moving to us, even though it is. But if I'm perceiving that I'm spinning and I'm not, that's a hallucination, and we call that vertigo. If you're hallucinating in your hearing system, those hallucinations are called sensory mismatch. It doesn't match what's going on in the world, or from the right side of my system to the left side of the system. Those sensory mismatches become hallucinations. Our hearing sensory mismatches are tinnitus. It's a hearing hallucination. Whereas with the vestibular system, a sensory mismatch is going to be vertigo. And so we're trying to parrot it out. Is if your eyes are open, your brain is seeing, hey, we're not moving. I'm not moving and the world's not moving. And if you got a good brain, it shuts it down. So if you're looking at something that's stable, I put my thumb up and I look at it and it starts to improve, we know the brain is pretty good because it's saying, this doesn't make sense. Tell it to shut up. Shuts down the hallucination. But then on the other end of the spectrum, if I open my eyes and look at something and it gets worse, it is a brain issue, the PIVC area, okay? And that PIVC, when we look, if it's a problem there, we're asking the brain to do even more, and it's having trouble doing the job it's supposed to do in the first place. And so as we look and it gets worse, it's because the brain's an issue. And so we close our eyes and, oh, it gets better. So now we're taking that visual input away from the brain, and it's dialing it down so that it doesn't intensify. In fact, it de-escalates that hallucination of I'm spinning or I'm floating or whatever, or I'm moving or through space. Okay. The other one I like to ask is it spinning versus floating? If it's floating, it's affecting the system that we call the otolith, which is the utricle and saccule in that labyrinth in the head, and it feels translation of your head and body, and it governs the response. it is the major player in giving us the sensation of being rooted to the ground and giving us that feeling of connectedness to the earth, but also giving us the rigidity against gravity so that we can be vertical, we can be upright, we can walk around on 2 legs instead of 4, right? And so that is the utricle and saccule. The utricle governs translation that goes anywhere in this direction, and the saccule governs translating backwards or up down. And that's why that down, feeling that gravity come through your head, as that gravity comes through your head, it gives you that sense of pull down and stability to the earth. And I've had patients that say, man, when all of a sudden I felt like I was I was floating through space and I was going to run into bouncing walls, and I jumped on the bed and hung onto the bed. Well, that's the utricle saccule, and particularly it's the saccule that's having a problem. Whereas the rotational thing is the semicircular canals that feel the rotations, and that feels like the world is spinning. Okay? So that was a lot of postgraduate anatomy and neuroanatomy and neurophysiology and that, but I'm trying to make it as clear as possible, but also you're going to hear a lot of review constantly. I'm going to be overlapping the things that we talk about as we go, and you'll find that if we do it this way, it's going to become something that you understand, number one, but then, and which makes all of the exercises reasonable and also exciting, because wow, that sounds like that could work. And then when you see it work, when you're doing the exercises and it does work, you're really excited because wow, that really works, and I've seen why I want to do those exercises. And that's my only goal for my staff, is that they help the patient become wildly excited about the exercises they're doing and the results they're getting from it. So, gosh, I'm hoping that there's a lot of questions now, and I'm hoping you'll get them to me. I love, explaining this, making it clear. I want it to be so clear that everybody understands and nobody misunderstands. And if you're not understanding it, that's not your fault. That's my fault. I'm not giving it in a way that makes it clear to you. And that's my problem. You keep asking the question, I'll find another way to teach it. That's one of my strengths, is being able to teach. So that's balance in a nutshell. We're going to come back with more of that in the future each week, but send your questions. Also, if you're ready to take your life back, let us know. Our office number is 702-798-1112. It's Advanced Neurospinal Solutions, Dr. Elmer and staff, and we would love to do an analysis, computer analysis, show you what is the problem so that you can clearly understand it, and then explain it to you and answer any questions that you have about it and that. So look forward to seeing you and hearing from you. And you also have friends who have this problem. And falling is scary and often life-threatening. Not only your life, how you live it, but also it can kill you. So look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care.